Hi, everyone. So excited to be here. I've got two of my favorite people today. I've got Kelly and I've got Jeff. And we picked a word primarily from Jeff on humility. So we can all start wrapping our minds around what humility is or what it means or what we're hoping to create. Chat is wide open. It's the Hour of Empower live stream on LinkedIn and YouTube. And with that said, Jeff, why don't you start us out with what's new since everybody saw you last week and what your initial thoughts on humility are?
So I have had so many things happen since last week. I've had the opportunity to interview awesome guests. I've been able to, including launch Bob Burke, who you introduced me to. So thank you very much, Don. It was awesome. You told me I was going to co-host today with Kelly, which I'm excited. This is 2.0 for me and Kelly. So thank you very much. This is awesome. I'm actually, my producer and I also have, now get this, everybody, we're going to do a podcast party at my home. So I'm going to have like 15 senior executives, CEOs and CHROs and chief XOs, right? All coming to my house, just friends of mine, people I know, all from the Boston, Providence area. They're going to come over for right around the 21st of December. And we're going to hang out, and I'm flying my producer in, and she's going to do a podcast, like a Big Brother type of thing with us all sitting around on couches and ask us just a bunch of questions. There'll be a 3-camera setup. I'm like, the only reason I did that is because podcast and party both start with P's, and it just seemed to flow.
Well, that's all it takes is anything that you can think of. And I applaud you because that's a new step in a new way of doing something. And you know what we're learning, me and Kelly talk almost all the time, is you almost have to do the first fail to know what you're dealing with.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You have to hit the wall and say, wow, that's a wall I want to stay a little further away from next time. But, just knowing that you took the hit already and now you're on the learning curve and the people curve, because, if it wasn't for some of my outreach, I wouldn't have got Bob. So my outreach got Bob, but then got Bob with you. And then who knows who was listening to either one of us that will now say, hey, and I think that's so important. So just to know, chat's open. Tanya's here from South Africa. And I know there's a time change, and Tanya's involved with sales funnels. So if you want to develop sales funnels and how to monetize, Tanya's a person you might want to talk to. We have a gentleman here from Nigeria. Welcome. And always open to more chat. With that, I can't wait to turn it over to Kelly and what her initial thoughts and catch up on humility after her catch up.
So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from. It's been 23 hours. It's great to do back-to-back sometimes. I feel like I'm making up for some of the times that I've missed recently due to family events, positive and some not so positive, but I'm here and I'm grateful to be here with you, Jeffrey, today. So humility, I mean, that was one of those things that immediately I was like, is there a recipe for this and we can bottle it? Because I know some folks that need a dose of it. And I think, and I don't know if I'm stating this absolutely accurately, but, humility is the, when you lower or have a moderate view of your own importance, the act of being humble, which I think when you read it in that way, it almost sounds like it's a negative because you're lowering your own self-importance. But then when you look at the other side of those folks that have such a grandiose view of themselves, you're like, yeah, you need to bring that down a few notches. And I think it's a great word for this time of year for so many reasons. I always say, the hue, and I'm not the one that made this up, but I do say it a lot. The true person of who they are when nobody's looking. And I see a lot of those acts around this time of year. I know some folks They have a foundation, and they don't publish any of this stuff that they do privately, because it's not through foundation money. They do it personally, that they order a whole boatload of turkeys this time of year and take it to a food bank. And they're like, no, we just want to do it. They go in, they drop them off, and they leave. They don't want any PR. And I'm just like, man, see, that's lovely. And if so many more people did that, and being that it is the time of year most people give to food banks and stuff, I feel like, friendly reminder, go around in July because they're usually hurting a lot after second quarter of the year, due to the fact that they get so overloaded at Christmas and Thanksgiving, which is wonderful. But if you are involved in any of with your local community, do check them out the end of the second quarter, because they're usually hurting and need some donations. So those are my thoughts this first time around.
Well, those are great thoughts, and it's lovely to have such a liftoff every time we're together. And when I think of humility, I think of accessibility, because the more humble you are, the more open you are to more people without judgment, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's where humility becomes a premium, a very valued resource. Is don't judge me by what you think I'm going to be judging you.
Yeah.
Right? And if you're the first one to show some humility, which is really the welcome, right? If you're going to be humble, you need to be welcoming. If anything, you're there to serve, right? You're there to make things better. So I think having a humble, humility-based, at least introduction to everybody, right? Until someone says their first word or makes their next action, which will then be wherever you follow it. But how many times did you wish you wouldn't have said something when you found out later about something you wish you knew?
Oh, yeah. That's humbling.
Yeah, and plenty of times, right? Because you're so used to like Jeopardy, like here's the question, what's the answer? It's like your rapid fire versus, hey, this is a person here. It's a new person. And you know what? I'm a new person to this new person. How do I come ahead of the game before the game starts? And I think that's almost like check yourself at the door, before you walk in as something you may not have to be, or maybe you need to learn what to be to do it. So Leslie's here. Always great to see Leslie. Leslie's usually Saturdays with Catherine Chadwick, a really great pairing. We've got a lady here from Sanja's here. I guess Jeff and yourself are from the Boston area, although you do say hello from South Carolina. So great to have you. Christy's here. Christy's one of the best on LinkedIn. Had the pleasure of being with Christy on Fridays, and Christy and Kelle do the Awesome Journey Tuesdays, 1 p.m. Really going out there to help our service members, our first responders, really courageous stories and really courageous people. So it's not just the story, it's the individual and who you get to know any way you want, right? From afar, or connect with people, learn what they're doing. And plus, Kelle and Chris are into some really great causes, helping some organizations, some people that are really needing that exposure, and actually being the beta testers for a lot of what we're doing, because it is so accessible and inexpensive. And we talked about that yesterday. Sonia says, we relocated south. Okay, then you're all right. And with that, Jeff, it looks like we got a wonderful audience here. We got a great conversation. How do you take humility to the next level?
Well, first of all, I wanted to capture what you guys said, because I thought you guys really captured it well. Lowering yourself versus others was a wonderful thought. Like, you're putting others before yourself, thinking of others before yourself. That actually is one of the third law of the Go-Giver. I'm really getting into this book, by the way. I'm really applying that, right? The second is that accessibility. I love what you said, Don, was accessibility, welcoming, servant. And I said, I said, I always try to be the definition of the servant leader, because whenever I'm a leader, I'm also a lackey. My last name being Jeff Lackey, which definition is a servant or a serf, right? Somebody who serves, right? It's also called frog eater, but we're going to throw that one off to the side. That's a whole separate definition we don't want to talk about. But that's a magician assistant, the frog eater, by the way, that reference. But
funny.
it is really wild. Looking your own name up in the dictionary comes up with some pretty strange things. But Steph, one of the people on my podcast is going to be playing later on, probably in January. She and I interviewed. She's a friend of mine from CBS. She's chief people officer at Able2, just left this month, and she's talking about a pivotal moment. They went through 500% growth in 4 years, right? Enormous growth. Right. And she said one of the pivotal moments was when somebody asked her, is like week 2 or 3, and said, what are you going to do about diversity? And instead of answering off the cuff or doing anything else, she said, why don't you give me a little bit of time, get my feet underneath myself, and I'll figure out what we need to do as an organization. And she did a listening journey, and she said, all of a sudden she realized what they meant by diversity was much different than what she had interpreted when that person had asked. They were looking at workforce representation, and yet she was thinking, kind of the higher art of diversity, right? Belonging, inclusiveness, and all of those things. And she's like, wow, I would have really missed the boat. And I said, what if missing that boat would have disenfranchised an entire group of individuals? And what if that disenfranchised would have eroded the credibility of the CEO and yourself and the leadership team? And what if, because of all of that, you could not have experienced 400 or 500% growth over 4 years, but yet had been kind of flown into oblivion, because you just couldn't get traction. You had no idea why. And actually, it really came from a small fork in the road where you just decided to listen, to put other people first, to actually go out and listen. So my definition, which I'd love to contribute to your wonderful definitions, was humility. One of the definitions is to restrain one's power so as to make room or allow for another to exercise their will or agency. Right.
Yeah, I think that's excellent, because you now have an opportunity to see what someone's resource and reserves are.
Right.
If you meet somebody as a person who has a family, who has a future, who has a life, right? At that point, everybody's lucky to be alive and be together, and is someone out there looking to gain every time they see a person? Is that a customer? Is that someone that they can pitch, right? And what life is that, right? You're always annoying people, in a sense.
Yes.
When you send
Good
out when you send out that 4-paragraph, thanks for connecting, I can get you 20 leads a day.
It's like,
what I said, why did I even not look at what I was getting into? I mean, it's easy to take a connection away too, so it's not in stone. But it's like you do something in the spirit of friendship, and someone returns it with kind of a sales slap, and it wasn't even like somebody on the street was flapping a brochure at you, So, anyways, with that said, what I found, especially when I did turnarounds and restructurings, it was the people on the floor who knew what was going on. It was the people at the counter. It was the people in the warehouse that could tell me so much more than the bean counters or some of these great talkers, but never being there. And that's where I learned humility, It is through them telling me, how hot it is in this warehouse in July or something like that. And those things are never going to show up on a balance sheet, and how could we do better? You're here. And I think that's the key to humility. And I think it comes right off of Jeff's definition It's how do you bring them into it, whatever they're already doing, right? Where is
That's
their
right.
voice being heard? And if you don't care what people have to say, you can't expect them to care about making your numbers or building your future. And I think to Jeff's point, some people just don't see the forest from the trees, or they're so transactional as we can save $50 right now if we act. And nobody ever says, what is this going to affect? Or who's it going to affect? And how many friends did you make that you didn't base it on first impression? Right? How many times you meet somebody and say, when I first met that person, just looked at them, I just thought they were this until they started talking. And now I did something like that. So Kelly, this is a great group, great topic. Great to see Christy here. She has with the word humility, vulnerability always is attached when I think of it.
Yeah.
These are the keys to trust and meaningful relationship. They foster openness, authenticity, and emotional intelligence. And I think there's some unselfishness here. Is you want someone who has humility with you.
Yes.
Right? You want to walk in a door and see the welcome mat, and not so much on the floor, but on the face, right?
Yeah.
When that person grabs you and gives you a hug and just, all of a sudden your world gets a lot better. So Kelly.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going to go with that after Jeffrey saying, being a servant heart. And because I believe that, but then the other side of that is being the receiver of something of a servant heart. And Christy is a great example. A humbling experience with a friend is, I was going through some pretty rough times, and Christy's like, my husband and I are sending you a plane ticket and you're coming out here so we can spend some time together, get you, get a new environment around you, because change of scenery can help. And that's a humbling thing when you're like, man, you sat back and thought enough to be like, hey, we want to do something to help, but to also receive it. And I think that's a humbling experience. Because as human beings, I think all of us, and we've talked about this on many other shows, when people reach out and ask us for help, we don't go like, ooh, what a loser. We're like, sure, what can I do to help you? But when we need help, we're terrible at asking for it. And it is a humbling experience to receive. And the other thing I thought about during that is just life experiences are humbling and change your mindset. And one that I'm thinking of, a very humbling moment of my life is after, leaving my ex-husband. And most of you already, it was a domestic violence relationship, very emotionally abusive. And he stalked me for a couple of years. It was a nightmare. In any event, a humbling experience was I left this, big house, nice house, cars, good job, the whole thing. And I ended up in a 1-bedroom loft apartment with a mattress on the floor. And that was it. And my clothes. And that's a humbling experience to be like, these things don't matter, because it was and I won't go down that path again for this conversation. But I did have a moment of humility and refining my faith, because I was like, please God, just let me be better and not bitter. And looking at life trials and tribulations is that way. They are, there's always something to learn. And that can be a humbling experience, I think, in many situations. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a good point. I love that, Kelly. One of the things that occurs, and I swear I'm not getting any proceeds from his book, but the law of receptivity from Bob Burg's The Go-Giver. It's the 5th law, right? You hit it on the head. It's sometimes harder to receive than to give.
Yes.
Right. It's humbling. It can even be at times embarrassing, even though you need it. Right. You're like, oh, like, I don't want to, but I know I need it. And okay, I'll take it. But then, like, we don't even know how to, like, we say thank you, but we it's not sometimes in our DNA. and
Mhm.
it's
Oh,
trying to
yeah.
figure out how to do that. And I love the fact that you blend it with faith, because I mean, that's a big deal, because I mean, kind of faith is all about receiving. Yeah. There's a
Mhm.
you know, until you receive it, you can't give it. Until you put your oxygen mask on, you can't help anybody else.
Correct.
And the same thing goes there. It's just the same concept. Like, if you're not willing to receive the gift, then you don't have the capability, you don't have anything to give, out to somebody. And that's a big deal. And from the so you have to be humble enough. I love what you said. You have to be humble enough to accept it, receive it, and then be willing to go and give. Yeah. What a
Mhm.
wow. You unpacked a lot there. I had no idea we'd go this deep. That's awesome.
That's
Thank
what
you.
we do here, and that's what we always try to do better with. And I think it's a maturity.
Mhm.
Everybody starts out feeling embarrassed or ashamed, not only asking for help, but demonstrating you actually need help, right? So
Mhm.
Yes.
some people are putting on that brave face and going getting through the day somehow. What I found, I excel at asking for help, right? Because if what we're saying is true and beneficial, then take it to another level. And what you do is you allow people to help you who can and want to. So
Mhm.
you're actually giving them a gift. But here's where it really
Yeah.
gets
Sorry,
very.
can I interject on that?
But
I just want to interject on the receiving the help is, and someone said this recently, but I experienced this in my own life, because my mom wanted to help me with certain things when I was going through my rough time with my divorce, and I was trying to stand so independent and do too much on my own. And one of my girlfriends had said, "You're robbing your mom of her joy by not allowing her to help you." And I was like, "Oh." I mean, and that changes your mindset, because it does, people who love you wanna help you, um, and allowing that, and so that helped change my mindset about receiving some things, and it's like, yeah, I can do everything, but I don't need to do everything. So sorry, that was my little
No,
interjection on
no,
you.
and here's where it's so important
Awesome.
is it comes back to you, and then you get a chance to go back to it because you've already opened that channel of communication. It's like, how many people come next door and say, "Hey, I need a cup of sugar." It's like take the whole bag, right? That's
Mhm.
such a little request, and I have so much of it, and I don't even need it for a while. And it's the same thing as how many people, and it's regrettable. If they would only called me, I would have been happy to do it, right?
Yes.
If I knew they needed $500 to pay a hospital bill or get something done, it would have been my pleasure, right? Because how many $500 checks are you ever going to write to somebody in need that you care about? So they're actually putting a feather in your hat. It's better than spending it on something you'll forget about in a week or two. And I think that's where humbling comes in, is what can I serve you with? Not just can I serve, but get
Mhm.
to the next point, what is it? Right? Not only
Mhm.
how you doing, well, I'm not doing very good. Well, what can we do to fix that? Because in essence, I always prided our businesses on customer service, because that's when you prove your promise to the customer. When
Mhm.
things don't go right, or when they have something to say and they want
Mhm.
somebody to listen to them. And
Mhm.
and I think at that point, it was always, what can we do to make this right? That was
Mhm.
always the first question. And most of
Mhm.
the time they come up with the same answer we would have came up with, or even less,
Mhm.
right? But at least everybody was happy. So I think there's a humility to service in everybody's service. And I think that
Mhm.
goes from top down, not just bottom up,
Mhm.
So with that, Jeff, you've been in the service industry for quite a bit.
Yeah. So my area, for those who don't necessarily know me well, was talent acquisition, or HR, human resources. Um, and in talent acquisition or recruiting, we would have a lot of hiring leaders that would need to hire a position, yesterday, right? All of a sudden, you need a position, and you need it filled as fast as possible. And inevitably, you would have recruiters getting very stressed out because these hiring managers are putting a lot of pressure in the system. They need it faster, faster, faster. And to your point, Don, what we did was we did actually something very simple. We collected surveys from every single hiring manager, but instead of putting it in some pretty report to give to them all the time, we just said, it's not anonymous. Your survey is going straight back to the recruiter that you were working with, as well as to their manager every single time for everyone that moment, like an email. And what happened was, at first, it was like the recruiter's like, ooh, that was tough feedback. But they go, but I'm so glad I got it.
Yes.
Because now I can do something with it. I can make a change in the moment and not wait a month or a year to take all that consolidated pretty charts and graphs and do something with it. Like, I don't mind taking negative feedback if I can use it constructively. And if I'm getting a lot of feedback over time, chances are, if I'm getting pretty good rates, I'm getting probably 9 out of 10, which are positive, and getting 1 out of 10, which is negative, that I can work on. That's actually pretty good. Like, hey, I'm going to say, hey, I got 1 out of every 10 I'm going to learn from more about things that I could do better, and 9 that make me feel better and say, hey, I'm actually doing some pretty good stuff here, and what I do is valuable. And what I heard from the recruiters was like, and it was an in the moment decision that they said, do you want to amalgamate these or you want to give them to recruiters? And I don't know where it came from. I just said, no, just give it to the recruiters. Just give it to them. I don't want to, don't forget about amalgamating and putting all this together. Just give it to them. No idea why I said that. I thought in the moment, it felt like it was like better that way, but I did. It wasn't some like, we didn't sit here and do like a 2-day discussion on strategy and come up with this. Like, it was a snap judgment in the moment that ended up with being a fork in the road. Our net promoter score for leaders was like an 85. Like, that is 85 out of 100 are 9s out of 10s. You have to have at least 6 out of 10, or if you're below a 6, it actually takes away from your top number. So your net promoter score is way more than just a positive percent. It's actually like basically promoters. 85% of our hiring leaders were promoters after we took away detractors. Nobody out there, no other Fortune 100, Fortune 500 has an 85 point promoter score. It jumped from 50 to 85. Why? Because the recruiters were humble enough to take the feedback, right? And the hiring leaders were willing enough to give that feedback in a way that they trusted somebody would do something about it. And guess what? They did. And that's what I love about this. That's why I love about service is it's really not that complicated if you boil it down. It's hard work. Don't get me wrong. It's really hard work, but it's not complicated. It's not rocket science to get it right. Thank you for teeing that up.
Well, no, and that was great insights. And I love sharing reality and experience, not just theory and projection and vision. And I think the other thing that really comes to mind when you think of humility is, how do you apologize? Yeah. We're talking so much about introduction, right? Someone comes to your door, you're humble, you're giving. But what happens when you discover you are wrong, and you discovered it? No one even had to tell you.
All the time.
How many people will admit that to themselves and then take the next step, which again is, some people never go the extra mile. They don't even go the first mile. If you take it and say, listen, Bob, it just occurred to me, you paid 3 times for something and it was my responsibility. And not only I want to take care of you, I want to apologize, right? I mean, so because you're sharing rarities with people. A lot of people go halfway and that's enough for me. Anything more is I'm giving too much, sharing too much, showing too much weakness. But someone who can demonstrate not weakness,
Mhm.
but reverence, right? Or something that wants to support somebody. And, you know, when you say, I want to just share my honest opinion, or I want to
Mhm.
just, you know, if you add that little adjectives to it, you know, and the other thing I think that you demonstrated in your experience with the hiring managers is communication was the key,
Yeah.
right? And once you opened up lines of communication and people got a chance to hear, you know, I don't like criticism, but damn appreciate it when it's like, I just
Mm.
found out a lot earlier than I would have. And it's like, I would have kept demonstrating this, like we shared a little tip on StreamYard, right? That's
Mhm.
one
Yeah.
more thing that could help people not have an issue. And that's where I think preventative service comes in so well, right? Where people call you up and say, you know, I just want to remind you it's time for a filter change, or we've got you in mind for whatever. Uh, the idea is, how can you exemplify yourself over what's used to,
Mhm.
what's typical, and make it a lasting experience? Kelly?
I mean, so many great things in that. And definitely with any kind of management, and even I don't care if it's an HR recruiter, whoever it is, having honest feedback. And you know, I'm like anyone else. We don't like to have things said that are negative about us, but
Mhm.
you don't improve unless you know those things. And I feel like
Yeah.
someone cares enough to take the time to tell you,
Mhm.
you know, in their choice of words, not someone that's just gonna be like, you know, "Why do you have RBF today?" Like, I mean, I don't consider that, and that's resting bitch face, I'm sorry,
Right. Yeah.
is
Exactly.
it can come across rude when people say things,
Yeah.
but I do feel when people take the time, and I guess that would even be, you know, an example to go back to Tuesday of this week when LinkedIn was having all sorts of trouble with lives, to know that,
Mhm.
you know, it's humbling to be like, wow, you got how many messages from how many people letting you know, hey, this is the experience we're having on the outside. Just wanted you to
Mhm.
know.
Mm.
I appreciate those things because you took the time, and it's wonderful. And you know, speaking of recruiter, because we do some things with job seekers and recruiters on the Awesome Journey on an occasion as well. Um, because we are on LinkedIn and want to help job seekers because there's too many of them. Um,
Mhm.
but it's also humbling to hear their stories. But I think
Mhm.
when people are giving feedback, really to circle back to that, my apologies, is if you know, and I definitely have seen this in you know, executive management for sure, when people know their name is gonna be attached to something, they're
Yeah.
not as apt to be honest. Um, and then there's those other people that take it to the extreme. You know, they're like, "I can't wait to give you my opinion and sign my name to it." Um,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
it's kind of one of those things that it's a little iffy in the sense of, do you put your name on it or do you not put your name on it?
Mhm.
And I don't really know when I learned that lesson necessarily or how it came to be, but I've always given my honest feedback. I'm just careful about how I choose my words because I feel
Yes.
like you can have those brick conversations, those difficult conversations without hurting someone's feelings.
Mhm.
Because I think when you come from a place of empathy and compassion, and you know, I've had
Mhm.
conversations with employees that I was more upset than they were before I had to go do the conversation. And
Yeah.
I'm not talking about termination necessarily, because I will say 99% of the people that I terminated, they shouldn't have been surprised when we were in that meeting. They earned that meeting
Mhm.
on their
Right.
own. Um,
Mhm.
so I think it's so important to get that honest feedback from someone, but also having someone that you can go to. Because there's definitely been instances as well that
Mhm.
I've had leaders that I've worked with, and
Mhm.
we'll go to them and be like, "Hey, man, am I doing all right? Because I'm not hearing anything." Because sometimes hearing nothing, it can either be a good thing or it can be a
Mhm.
bad thing. Um,
Yeah.
and you know, thank God in my case, it was not a bad thing, um, because silence doesn't mean that all is good. So
Mhm.
I think it's also humbling to know that you can go, excuse me, and ask for the feedback yourself if somebody's not being forthcoming with it.
Yeah.
Um, and
Mhm.
you do have to build a skin on it because, you know, there's times where it's like, well, I don't like how, you interacted with this person. Because you have to humble yourself when you're dealing with those difficult people in corporate America. Um,
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I'm sure we've all been there, had that one person that's like, God, you are just a thorn in my side. And whenever a meeting would come up on my calendar with this person, it was just, like you dread it going in. Um, and then just a little additional tip. I just changed my mindset with it because it is like anything else. If I'm expecting this meeting to suck and I go in, it's going to suck.
Mhm.
I went in and I was like, it's going to be great because I'm going to address what we need to address and make sure we stay on our agenda or have an agenda.
Mhm.
I'm not going to allow them to use my time in a wasteful manner. Because this one guy in particular, just this funny little side story, he was one of these that you would go into a meeting and he used to always schedule him in his office. And you would walk in, and it wasn't just me, but it was truthfully any female in the organization. And he
Okay.
would keep his back to you on his computer, not even acknowledge that you came in, even though you said, hey, are you ready for our meeting? Kind of give you a hand and just have you sit there and for, 15 minutes. And subordinate staff, of course, would just sit there the whole time. And I finally got to a place where I was like, I'm not allowing him to treat me this way. And so after I would wait 6 minutes and I would be like, which I think is more than enough time. And I'd be like, if you're too busy to meet right now because we need this full half hour to go over our agenda, we can reschedule because I definitely have other things I can do. And training him of how to treat me. Like, I'm not going to sit here for 30 minutes while you ignore me. And then when you're ready, you're going to go past meeting time. So yeah, he was a challenge for me. And it ended up working over time and then teaching other staffers the same way. You can be authoritative in yourself without being disrespectful, but you've got to teach people how to treat you. And that is a humbling experience because it's like, hey, I participated in allowing this person to treat me badly.
Well,
So wow, I
maybe,
took a total left turn there.
well, maybe it's pretty interesting.
Cool.
And maybe what we're talking about is the opposite of humility is entitlement, right?
Mhm.
And
Oh
the
yeah.
other thing is, can we marry humility to constructive criticism? Because I think the point that really sticks out that you made, Kelly, is it's how you say something to someone, right? You may be thinking you're helping them, but the more familiar you are with someone in your relationship and your communication, the more license you have to get more honest faster.
Hmm.
There's also that level of respect that it's like, well, don't take this opportunity to stick it in harder, or around a lot of other people.
Yeah.
And I think that that's so important is you want the criticism. And I always say criticize in private,
Mhm.
praise in
Yes.
public, and that's another thing because your level of humility disappears if your intent starts to be a little bit different than what goes with humility. And then that gets to be the next interaction, right? That you determine, is this a person of humility? And other thing is this a person who appreciates humility in someone else, right?
Mhm.
If it's not respected or even wanted,
Hmm.
then I'm serving up something that doesn't align. And then the question is, why am I in situations with people that I don't align with?
Right.
What
Yeah.
is that going to cause? Accommodation, compromise. Hey, it's a good job, making good money. Doesn't take much to do. But what do you do? What are you selling yourself for and to who?
Mhm.
Right?
Well, and I
That's
think
true.
it kind of goes to the whole thing of because, unfortunately, this person that I'm referring to, he was one of those guys that, that I swear we were all like, he knows where the bodies are. Like, how it is he still have a job here? And,
Right.
but you have to make the decision of how am I going to react to his behavior and how am I going to participate in the interaction with this person because it is all up to you on how you do that. And it is humbling because it's like when you do understand, because I understand his personality and the way he was, because he not a humble person. He couldn't wait to brag about himself. He was so great. Just ask him. Um, you is that person usually has a very low self-esteem and is very injured behind that armor of I'm amazing, because they're trying to convince themselves of those things. And when you have that mind shift of understanding that this person is wounded and they're just acting out based on it has nothing to do with you. He didn't dislike all those people. It had to do with his internal vision of himself in some way. Yeah, I do think he did eventually get fired, but it took a long time. I mean, years. And you never understand. And I'm like, and I had many a conversation, again, a little side note, with other executive team, and just like, you guys realize that he's impacting our staff, like overall. People, when you see that person who does think they're everything and they're a cancer within the organization, others have the mindset can shift in them going, well, why should I try so hard? Because he still gets rewarded. So what's the point?
Well, everything's a precedent. Before I swing it over to Jeff, I've been remiss without mentioning all these wonderful comments. Beverly's here. Beverly's here every Tuesday. Thank you, Kelly. The longer you live, the more humbled you become. Hard knocks humble you. Yeah, even people who are challenging at the time taught you things that you would have never known without the challenging people. And they gave you a contrast to the good people. You know, there's an alternative. That's a good reminder for me right now, Kelly. You don't have to do it all. Even though I can't, must I? When you're capable, you can be too hands-on. Elizabeth is here. Great to see Elizabeth. Elizabeth says so many people settle to work with companies who they don't align with. Yeah, and you know, that's a precedent or a momentum shift that takes you in the other direction, because it's really freedom that people should be looking for. It's independence, right? And you know, sometimes it's great to know you can fall and there will be hands there to keep you up.
Yes.
You know, that's people's security. People, honestly, they look at things or bank balances. That stuff can go in a flash. But it's your friends, your relationships, the people you've actually invested in and supported. Their wealth is your wealth if you need it, right? And I think that's another reason to be humble. You never know who knows someone. You never know what's going to change tomorrow, you know, and you never want to hear those words that you said to somebody when you thought you were entitled. You know, how embarrassed and ashamed are you when you find yourself treating people like that? And it's usually, I don't think by intention, it's just lack of awareness. People are just used to it. Well, they'll wait as long as they have to. You know, they're getting paid. You know, that's what usually people think. It's like, we bought your time. We can tell you how we want to use it. And you know, that's not something that's fortifying. You know, it's not something that duplicates well. Because it's like, hey, they just gave us the green light to be disrespectful, just like them, you know. And all of a sudden,
shadow of the leader.
Yeah, Jeff, you've seen it all.
As my woolly hair would tell, you know, I got that white stuff. Yeah, I was thinking about an interaction I actually had with my little tiny team just recently. So we had a small miss, right? We had a miss of something, and I won't get into the details, but I actually, you know, because these people are fractional, so they don't really work for me. They work as part of our team, but they're not, you know, fully on payroll. They're not employees, right? And we missed something. And I had to really step back and think for a second, how do I approach this in such a way? Because it's also working across, you know, time zones, cultures, personal situations. And I started out and I took my own advice, something actually that David Casey a long time ago taught me, you know, separate intent from impact and say, I know our intentions are good. I know your intentions are good. I know all of our intentions are good.
Mhm.
And I can see that. I know that, and laid out what I think our combined intentions are. But unfortunately, this thing that we missed, this is the impact it's having. And
Mhm.
so we can't necessarily fix that. That we can't go back in time and fix it, right? But let's learn from it so that we can find a way to constructively as a team, find a way not to repeat that in the future.
Mhm.
Because we don't want to continue to have that impact because it's actually taking away from the thing that we're intending on and making better and improving that we all said we're really committed to, we're excited about. And you know what? I really had to take a moment, right? Because at first you're just like, oh, what happened? Like, I
Mhm.
can't believe it. Like I
Yeah.
thought we had this stuff locked in. Like I was sure we were locked in. Like this is a process that we were so good at. We were wash, rinse, and repeat every time. And all of a sudden it falls off the tracks. Right. And you're gonna go, oh, what happened? Like, I can't believe it. And then I'm just like, okay, you know what? I need to, this is where actually the word humility came from, was that experience, because I had to try to humble myself and like step back and lower my power
Mhm.
so that I could allow them to come forward and actually talk from a place of not feeling threatened, not feeling judged.
Right.
And guess what? They came up with awesome ideas of how to fix it and what they're going to do and what each other can do and how they can work together and how they can help each other. And like, and the one person, said, well, it was my fault. I said, no, no, no. The other person jumped in. No, 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 that wasn't your fault. That was all me, and I'm sitting there going, how on earth did I get so lucky as to have some of the best team in the whole wide world, right? How on earth am I so blessed to have this wonderful team who's just tripping over themselves in the effort of trying to get better and to improve off of something? And I just said, I'm just grateful for the mentors that helped me and the people who advised and counseled me over my lifetime that gave me those things. But it's true. It's like those moments are amazing once you see that you can actually, to your point, Don, and also Kelly, as you lower yourself, other people get to step up
Yeah.
and step
Meeting them
in.
where
And
they're
you can see
at,
that.
right?
Yeah, that's
I mean,
exactly
that's
meeting where they
important just
are.
with anyone. I think with, God, that's everybody needs that lesson, because we can tend to judge things from, like you said, if you're looking at it from, yeah, from a leadership perspective, this was a hit. Ouch, it's going to hurt my bottom
Yeah,
line. We're going to have to redo this. So that doesn't
yeah,
feel great. But now let me get down to where the issue really lies, where we
mm,
can't undo it. It exists. Um,
right.
but it comes from having the compassion and empathy, and I don't remember who actually, but I know it was one of my mentors
Mhm.
along the way that ever said, like, if you're feeling emotional about something with your team because there was an error, because shit happens. I mean, it's
It
unavoidable
does.
throughout your career. Is allow yourself to feel it, but don't have the meeting with your team during that time when your emotions are high. Get
Yes.
yourself in check first, and then think about how you want the process to go. What does the solution look like in your mind? Um,
Mhm.
because I mean, same thing. I've had some major issues with people making errors in printing tens of thousands of something, and they were all
Ah,
incorrect, and having to
mm.
redo them. But
Mhm.
when you're open to that person, I don't know, he was bawling, he felt so bad.
Oh,
But being
no.
there with empathy and compassion to, we're not curing cancer. Granted, yeah, that hurt our budget a bit, but we always had wiggle room because you have to build in some kind of margin of error along the way. But people are
Yeah.
so much more receptive, and even having team members come to you and tell you when they make a big mistake.
Right.
That's a humbling thing because that means they trust you, and that
Mm.
comes from being the compassionate, empathetic, servant leader, in my opinion anyways. So those are my
Well,
thoughts.
I think that
Great.
what Jeff and Kelly just kind of illustrated that's so important is there were two opportunities there. One was the group activity, right? And an action didn't meet expectations, and basically everybody understood that, and collectively everybody took ownership, responsibility. But then the second opportunity is Jeff, being the me person there, now has an opportunity to show how he wants this to be framed. Right?
Yeah.
This is the opportunity after the fact that whatever we decided and we're going to go forward with, here's how I feel again about the team, about what you just demonstrated. And all of a sudden, instead of building fear or intimidation like some leaders, you messed up, you're going to work twice as hard, you're not going to take that anymore, we're giving it over to Gail. I mean, all this stuff, and it gets real weird and queasy after a while. Versus, hey, I know we're doing the best we can. And what you find out as a leader is you're going to figure it out either before it happens or after it happens when someone does something. And if you're the kind of person where I'm really just interested in intent and purpose, because a quick example, we hired a young girl, just out of high school, a really nice girl, and we put her into a merchant processing, taking care of MasterCard and Visa. And she wasn't, in my opinion, only there a week or two. And she ended up making an $8,000 mistake by giving, an AR more credit than they were really authorized for. And everybody was, we got to dump her. She's got to go, $8,000. How could, and I said to everybody, I liked her and I believed in her. And I said, if this was an $8 mistake, would we be talking like this?
Right.
They said, no. So I said, we're talking about the money, not the person. Right. And that's not proper. Meanwhile, she stayed for like 12 more years, became a significant vice president in the company.
Awesome.
Right. And it was just believing in somebody and not the hit. And really teaching everybody is it's about the people here, right?
Yeah.
The money follows what the people do or don't do. And, there's so much reserve because just like we talked a little earlier, people pay for people's time. There's not enough value in just their time. If you're not getting the whole person, the whole mind, the whole everything working for you, that's going to be the distinguishing factor. You know what they say, it's not how big the dog is in a fight, how much fight's in the dog. The big test is when you got crunch time and you see people working till 4 a.m, on their own, texting back and forth, trying to fix a software issue or whatever. And that gives you pride knowing that, hey, I made a good investment. And flashy never make it over time, because they don't get the respect, the accessibility. So, Jeff, we cover a lot of ground here today. I mean, because of humility.
Thank you. You know what? The thing that really came to me was that, I was thinking about people. And Kelly, your example really spoke to me about that one leader who you had to sit there for 15 minutes. And I thought about a lot of things came flooding in as you're giving that example. And one is a coach who I knew that said that he liked to hire people who he liked to work with, right? Right. And part of that is people who are who are humble, who are willing to be able to restrain their power, they're not weak. They don't lack accountability. They have accountability. They have strength. They have power. They have intelligence. They have capability, but they're willing to restrain those things. They're willing to lower themselves in that moment so that other people can go first, and so that they can lift other people up in that. In the process of lifting others, they're willing to go lower. I mean, have you ever tried to lift somebody above your head without squatting down first? It ain't going to happen. right? Unless you're like the Hulk, and you got like a 5-pound person that you're lifting over your head. Like it ain't gonna happen, right? So if you're gonna lift other people up, you gotta get down, you gotta get low, to be able to put them on your shoulders. And that's the whole idea, I think, that we want to say, is that, like, we want to work with other people that have humility, that exercise that routinely. And that's actually something that as a talent acquisition person, something I look for. I look for people who have humility, right? I like to work with those people because they're clay. I can help shape them. I can work with them. I can make them better than they ever thought that they were before, right? And they can make themselves even better than they thought they could be. And that's cool. But if you got a brick, it's hard to shape a brick, something that's unwilling to be changed. You got to take a chisel to that sucker, and that ain't no fun.
Well,
and even that, you just have a whole bunch of bits of brick.
Yeah. That's usually my bricks. Yeah.
Well, and I think, before closing, it's really a matter of how much fun you're having with the people you're with, because not everything is going to go as well as it should. And, how you forgive others is how you should be expected to be forgiven. I used to always tell my people, I make as many mistakes or more than you do. Can't you give me the same forgiveness as I try to give you? Is everything, and it hurts me more than it probably hurts you, and it helps me probably more than it helps you too. But that's really the thing, is getting people to know who you are, and the other thing, you're part of their family, whether you care to be or not. How you impact the rest of their family makes a huge difference on how they're going to impact you and your situation, right? So getting to know their wife and their kids and what's going on in their life, right? And remembering once in a while, I was always buying Girl Scout cookies on Girl Scout cookies. It didn't matter if I was going to eat them. If somebody's daughter came in to sell them, I'm going to buy 5 boxes, right? Because you don't want to be looked at the guy who says, well, he's on a diet, he doesn't eat them, or here's $25, donate my 5 to somebody who enjoys it. And I think that's the fun in giving, because you know what? You never give as much as you think you're forced to give. I mean, how many times today will someone call you up and say, I need $20, or can you give me a ride, or whatever? Hardly ever. No. Right. And the times it is, like, happy to, I can do, if I can do it, I'll do it. Right. So Kelly, this has been a wonderful conversation. Well, let's finish with Jeff and then finish with Kelly. So final thoughts.
Kelly, over to you. I did my final thought. Kelly, over to you.
I got exhausted. Kelly.
Yeah, such a great conversation. So always so humbling to be here with you guys. So everyone, thank you for joining us today. I'm always grateful to be here. It's always fun to do a back-to-back and great conversation. I mean, I love that we never know where it's going to go. And it always takes some twists and turns that we never expect, which is always so great. And I can't believe next week is Thanksgiving already. Like, how in the heck did that happen? In any event, so if anyone is traveling, because I think today they say is one of the busiest travel days of the year for people taking the week off, safe travels to everyone. And as I always end with, go out and shine so bright that others can't help but shine too.
So well said.
Wonderful.
And, just to top off humility, it is a humbling experience to be able to talk to so many wonderful people in such a short period of time every day, and then be honored and blessed with individuals like Kelly and Jeff. And what's really beautiful is we have no idea what we're going to say, what we're going to hear, but it does elicit memories and situations that had meaning to us, or it wouldn't have come to mind. So in a lot of ways, people ignite that, but what's even more wonderful about it, it's shared, right? Kelly's experience, Jeff's experience. It's like either you're saying, I was right there knowing exactly what you're saying, or, hey, now when that person turns their back on me, I'm going to use that strategy, right? And that's how the ripple really makes a difference. Little things over time compounded
Mm.
can change major things. And, sometimes it's a degree. Maybe I should tilt my humility down a little bit tomorrow. Maybe I should say something to the person who parks my car, right? Or waits on my table a little bit more. Whatever it is, it gives you an opportunity to give. With that said, come back tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to have a great Catherine and Carol Kim, who's a very big HR person, coming back for a second time. And she's doing some amazing things, books and speaking and blah, everything. So with that said, thank you again. Come back if you can tomorrow. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Kelly.